How often have you picked up a game because you've heard great things or were excited about it, only to be left in a puddle of depression when you find out it's not for you? This is a situation that affects games in any genre, and JRPGs are no exception. A few months ago I shared a handful of games that I was a big fan of, but where the wider consensus was a bit more mixed. Today, I'm flipping the coin. I'm going over 7 games that many people loved, but I wasn't too fond of. And we'll start with a release from last year that a lot of people were looking forward to because it was a return to the well-regarded Mario and Luigi franchise with Brothership. This was one of 2 games that I took on holiday with me, so in between while travelling I'd be playing this and Dragon Quest III HD 2D, and on some days when I just wanted to be lazy and chill, I'd be playing it for a few hours at a time. Now Brothership was already off to an interesting start even before it released. There was that infamous 5 out of 10 rating by IGN that ignited the fanbase into a frenzy. And while I don't think it's deserving of a score that low, I was let down by it come the end. I'm fine with the basic story. It's a Mario game at the end of the day, I'm not expecting anything grand, but what I did want were diverse zones, eye-catching animations, a light-hearted feel, and some wacky developments. In many cases it does that. Every island you visit is unique, there are a host of inspired puzzles, you'll have to use the abilities of the brothers in different ways to proceed, and revisiting them is often encouraged to find additional items and secrets. The combat is also fairly enjoyable with the time-based aspect, but my real issue with Brothership is that it's got some shaky pacing. Initially, the opening 5 hours are slow, like I didn't have any special abilities for a fair amount of time, just my basic jump and hammer attacks, not to mention the move animations can take a long time in the later stages. There were instances in the adventure where it was quite clear the game was padding itself out, and in light of that I did become bored with it near the end, even with mine believing it was still a decent game and worth checking out. It was good, but nowhere near one of the best I played last year. Now we jump back one more year to 2023 with Crymachina. Again, a lot of people liked this. On Steam it sits at a 9 out of 10, but I didn't really see it. To Crymachina's credit, it was one of my most anticipated games of the year. It was pretty much the only reason I made a trip to London so that I could get a hands-on impression of the game early, which unfortunately I came away let down from because I barely got 30 minutes out of it. After playing it, I realised why they gave me such little time with it because the gameplay loop was notably shallow. Crymachina goes like this. You go into a stage, which is basically a hallway most of the time. There are some branching paths with some optional bosses, but they basically lead to death most of the time anyway. You get to the end, you fight a boss, you see a cutscene, Aina is going to take over a gateway, you go back to the Imitation Garden and see another cutscene, you go to the Tea Party events, watch some dialogue play out, level up, equip your items and then go to the next stage. Rinse and repeat until you finish the game. It's just a by-the-numbers game with very little to set it apart from a generic JRPG experience, which is unfortunate because the game had some cool parts within that colossus of mediocrity. The character designs are really interesting, the actual scale of the levels is brilliant in terms of background imagery, the OST is great, and the story is fairly satisfying, but in short, I found the majority of my time with the game to be shallow. The Imitation Garden, for example, which was advertised as a core part of the experience, is nothing but a glorified menu, and the combat, while it looks good, is actually quite formulaic as far as action-centric games go, with many of the characters playing similarly to one another. It doesn't help as well that progression in the game is near on non-existent in terms of skills or abilities. What you start with is what you end with. It's not a bad game, but I found it to be average, and like I say, a lot of people did like it, so it certainly has merit for others, but I'm just not seeing it, especially considering that it's a short game clocking in at around 12 hours, and it's still £55 even till this day. For that price, you can do better. Talking about games that a lot of people liked but I didn't, I can't put this together without mentioning Tales of Vesperia. I've made it clear since I first played it, this is my least favourite Tales game to date, and it remains as such even after the others I've played since then. Now part of that could have been because I went in with very high expectations. A lot of people told me that this was the best Tales game, that I was going to love it, and to prioritise it over games like Dragon Quest XI. So I took their recommendations to heart and fired it up. But after finishing it, I was left with a sense of, have I missed something? I just don't see it with Vesperia. The only things I genuinely liked were the lead in Yuri, Rapide, who is good by default because he's a dog, and the late game combat, which some argue is the best in the series. I don't hold the same opinion. I think Grace's F is better, but hey, it's still a highlight of the game. But the rest of it is just generic to me, the story in particular. One of the most aimless narratives I've seen in a JRPG, filled with contrived developments and a final act that comes out of nowhere. I can't stand some of the characters like Rita, who is easily my least favourite in Tales till this day, and the argument that some make where Tales is not known for good stories, I don't buy that at all. Tales of Berseria and Tales of the Abyss had great stories, heck, Symphonia's was pretty good too. Vesperia's just doesn't compare. Once again, it's a case where I can acknowledge it's a good game and I really wanted to like it, but I can't lie to my honest feelings on what I think about it. By the time the credits rolled, I was happy to be moving on. And we're not done. Now we move on to a game that got a few awards in the year it released, but once again, I didn't see it. Another case of a game that I'd say was good, but nothing more than that, and it's Sea of Stars. No doubt it's excelled in certain areas. Art style was very nice, beautiful colour palette, very good OST, and the sound design is top tier. There were efforts to make it more accessible in a novel way with the use of the accessories that you can toggle on or off to effectively change the difficulty of the game without focusing on arbitrary elements like enemy damage or health pools, and the combat was fun for about 10 hours. But once the novelty wore off, I started to see Sea of Stars as a shallow experience, one that looks very good on the surface but is sputtering underneath the bonnet, with gameplay in particular feeling stagnant. The skills you use in the earlier stages are the same ones you're going to be using at hour 20, and the fact that all ally levels are grouped together just ensures that the entirety of the game feels on rails. There's no opportunity to potentially over-level or even under-level yourself if that's what you want to do. The game just keeps you on the straight and narrow, which is fine. I've played many games that do this, but I need more mechanics to work with if that's the angle we're going down. Not to mention most of the strategy of the game comes down to breaking locks. But the real issue will always be the story for me. Quite simply, it's held back because of Garl. I've heard people say that this was intentional because Zale and Valir were meant to be self-insert, which makes no sense at all. If they have their own canonical names that you can't change, and they speak their own lines of dialogue, then they are not self-insert. They are characters who were intended to be part of the story of this game. And Sabotage Studios realised this, because in the free DLC, Throes of the Watchmaker, they removed Garl completely and made a story completely focused on Zale and Valir instead. Quite simply, it's a game I expected much more from, a good game, but considering the praise it got, it should have been more than that. So what's worse than a game that you had high expectations tied to that failed to deliver? How about a game that you forgot you even played? That applies to the remastered GrimGrimoire OnceMore, which came out in 2023. It was one of those instances where I scanned through my list of RPGs in storage, dusted off a few titles, and found this beneath a pile of cobwebs, coming to the sudden realisation that, oh yeah, I did play that. Vanillaware's pedigree was the only reason I wanted to try it out. Irrespective of them covering a number of genres, they normally create games that appeal to my tastes no matter what area they target. In this case though, it was a rare miss. Even still, it does have some great aspects. The artwork of Vanillaware, which is pretty much trademarked at this point, brings the setting of the Silver Star Tower to life. The actual character designs and backgrounds look really good. The sound design is fairly strong, and I loved the magical premise as a backdrop. There were two main areas where it stumbled though. Initially the gameplay, which was advertised as a real-time strategy title, when in reality it's more a tower defense game. Gameplay takes place on a 2D plane, and Lilith can call on a number of minions to do battle, each with their own strengths and weaknesses, and they're split into separate schools. The missions generally boil down to survive a wave of enemies or destroy the enemy's mana fonts, similar to games like Red Alert or StarCraft. In fact, this game was inspired by StarCraft, but it just doesn't match up to its inspiration at all. StarCraft in particular had a huge amount of depth in terms of ways to approach battles, while GrimGrimoire barely scratches the surface. The other issue is undoubtedly the story. GrimGrimoire operates on a 5-day cycle, all centred around an evil wizard who is attempting to take the Philosopher's Stone for himself. As with many games that operate on loops like this, the game is all about discovering new information in each subsequent jump back to eventually find a way to stop it. Now, while the actual method is sound, it's just not executed as well as it could have been. there's something missing in its presentation that meant I was never engaged with it, and while I couldn't pinpoint the exact reason, what I do know is that by the third loop I was done, and the gameplay didn't do enough to keep me invested. Again, a good game in the eyes of some, but one that failed to capture my interest. Now we move to a game that I was very surprised didn't catch my attention because it had all the ingredients needed to be a hit for me. And again, it's a game that a lot of people loved. It sits at a 9 out of 10 on Steam and an 8 out of 10 on Metacritic, and that is Rune Factory 4. I played the re-released version on Switch, which apparently had some technical issues, but even if I played the original version, I just don't think it would have grabbed me. By most accounts, it should have been a win. Farming focus, a simple but fun combat system, light-hearted atmosphere, a wide array of enjoyable and relatable characters, it's what I look for in a more low-key JRPG experience. But I quickly started to feel bored with it. The whole micromanaging tied to farming and crafting started to become tedious quite early on in the game. I found it to be excessively grindy, the characters that were meant to be a highlight of the experience weren't grabbing me at all, I found the story to be bland, and the difficulty spikes didn't help it in the later stages. One of the big oversights for me was that some of the events when it first released were randomised, and these were needed to progress the story, so if you got unlucky you'd be waiting around for days at a time till they triggered. Marvelous realised this was a silly idea because they patched it later on. Add on to that some cumbersome controls, and I just don't see it with Rune Factory 4. Like I say, it's a game that a lot of people liked, but I didn't see it. And naturally, when I find a game that I'm no longer having fun with, I'll bounce out. The last game is going to be a blast from the past, a title from the PS2 era in Atelier Iris 3 Grand Phantasm. Now I do a lot of Atelier focused content on this channel. I love the series almost as much as I do Trails and East, and no doubt I am a fan for life. But during the PS2 era, Gust made the decision to globalise the series in light of the traditional formula slowly losing interest, especially come the Grimnad games. What came from projects A6 onwards till A10, which are the codes given to mainline Atelier games, were 5 games on the PS2 that were also the first time that Western fans got a taste of what Atelier supposedly was, those being the 2 Manichemia games and the 3 Iris games. When I make a video on Atelier, there is always a handful of comments saying that Atelier should make a return to the Iris trilogy and Manichemia. Without fail, there are a few. I'm partially in agreement, and then partially not. I think the 2 Manichemia games would do well in this day and age, purely based on their premise and being actual good games, but the Iris trilogy has differing quality all over the spectrum. The only genuine great game in the trilogy is the second one. The first is too clunky for my tastes, and the third one is just not good at all, average at best. The only thing that Iris 3 has going for it is its opening theme tune and its solid combat system, but the rest of it, the repetitive dungeon crawling that has a timed element to it, the needless platforming, the unlikable characters, the lackluster story, I don't see it at all. I struggle to understand why Atelier Iris 3 is held in any sort of acclaim. Quite simply, games like Atelier Iris 3 almost ended the series completely, and my worry now is that Gus seem to be reverting back to that cycle, trying to appeal to a global audience with games like Atelier Ryza 3 and Atelier Yumiya. I understand the series has to evolve, but I wanted to keep the focus of what made them great in the first place, which looks to be the case with the upcoming release of Resdiana. Time will tell what direction Gust chooses to take the series, but games like Iris 3, for me, are better off forgotten. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, please like and subscribe for more JRPG content, and consider joining my Patreon if you're interested. Peace.